Hello everybody, it's me, Fee, or Fiona Timms, otherwise known as White Zulu, author of my autobiography of the same name, and I welcome you all to another chapter of my book. I do hope you're all enjoying my life story, and I must thank all of you for being such dedicated subscribers, especially those who have written such complimentary comments below my videos. They are much appreciated. I would like to point out that the previous South African flag hanging on the wall behind me is not a political statement. It is simply a piece of history in the background of my first 50 years of my life, being born and growing up in my beloved mother country, South Africa. My autobiography, White Zulu, is not a political commentary, and frankly describes my experiences of growing up with the Zulu tribe as my family. That flag is simply a piece of cloth signifying the history of South Africa. It was originally used by the Union of South Africa from 1928 to 1961, and later the Republic of South Africa until 1994. I felt trapped at Glen Cruton, and there appeared to be no escape. I longed to get out of there, move, anywhere. Even the Tinkers' camp, shambolic as it looked whenever I drove past, was starting to look inviting. Their myriads of rosy-cheeked children seemed so happy, playing on that muddy area in front of their shelter, surrounded by sodden, half-flattened brown bracken. And I often sat at our bedroom window in the mornings and gazed over at Kerrera, the tiny uninhabited island in Oban Bay, which was sometimes visible if the weather conditions were clear enough. However lonely it looked out there, it couldn't feel lonelier than I was right now. I saw Fred at mealtimes and bedtime. He came back with his mother, looking more and more despondent. We got very little time to ourselves, as we were always being rushed to dress and appear downstairs for the obligatory, but unwanted in my case, cocktails before meals. He fell asleep before I came back from my evening soak in that lovely deep bathtub. And because I slept so badly, probably because I spent so much time dozing off in the daytime, I lay awake and wondered, worried about my future until the small hours. I only woke when he shook me gently to tell me to get up and dressed for breakfast. It didn't help that it was still pitch dark at 8:30 in the morning, and I blundered around, still half asleep, trying to get dressed before stumbling downstairs. Breakfast hadn't changed since my first morning there. Bob still lit his cigar once he'd eaten, allowing its malodorous grey smoke to drift over the table, and once her drained coffee cup clinked back into its saucer, Bar hurried Fred out to see the Glen Cruton estate accountant, who had an office in Oban, or took him out onto the estate. On Christmas Eve, his sisters and younger brother arrived from London. One older sister, one younger sister, and his youngest brother, Max. I liked them, but they were reserved and withdrawn, and I was beginning to understand why. They openly and patently loathed their parents and had as little to do with them as possible. There was no warmth between Bar and Bob, and certainly none where their children were concerned. Except with Fred. They behaved in quite the opposite way with him. He loved his parents and got on well with both of them, but they treated him quite differently from the way they treated his siblings. They obviously adored him and made it clear that he was their favorite. I was even lower in the pecking order, beneath Fred's younger brother, his two sisters, and their husbands. It had become glaringly apparent that I wasn't good enough for the family. What nobody knew at that stage was that a fairly new arrival, another addition to the family, not me, was to be the catalyst to far greater destruction of Glen Cruton and its contents than anything envisaged thus far. Christmas in winter was a completely new experience for me, and I could not get into the spirit, no matter how hard I tried. Sizzling sun outside, the shrill, static scream of cicadas, the sound of the river swollen with summer rains roaring through the valley. Inside, the spicy fragrance of asparagus fern tickled my nostrils excitingly, mixed with the scent of pine as needles drooped from our Christmas tree, chopped from some young pines on the hill behind our homestead, already rapidly wilting in the comparative coolness of our sitting room. All these were the sensations I associated with Christmas, the stimuli that sparked that inner childhood thrill I felt on those mornings as I woke at crack of dawn to a pearl-streaked dawn sky and the promise of an exciting day of presents and turkey, interspersed with swimming and tennis. This morning I surfaced groggily to the alarm at 5 to 8, feeling as if I could sleep for another 4 hours at least. Fred had already gone downstairs to spend some time with his brother and sisters while he had the opportunity. I sat on the seat at the window while I got dressed in my warm, elastic-waisted maternity trouser suit I'd bought in London, having chosen bright apple green because it was a cheerful colour. But now it looked quite wrong and rather garish, and gazed out of the window into the pitch black, listening to the icy wind howl past the castle, sleet clattering occasionally on the window pane, and wondered what I was doing there. Would this be the first of many such Christmases? I felt a wave of homesickness wash over me and sank back in the chair, enervated and shaky. I wanted to panic, scream, run away, but I couldn't. I didn't even have the strength to cry. I wasn't able to dredge up anything that I could pinpoint as something to grieve over. Perhaps it wasn't homesickness, but terror, a panic attack, dread at what my life had so suddenly become, and what kind of future I had ahead of me. I tried looking only as far ahead as the birth of our baby in early May, but my mind still raced beyond that, and I tried to picture ourselves, our little family of 3, living here happily under these circumstances. It was impossible, and the effort made my stomach contract and brought on an attack of sour heartburn, to which I was particularly prone as my pregnancy progressed. My Highland doctor had given me antacids to treat the condition, which was apparently very common during and after the 5th month, after the morning sickness went away. But mine seemed to be getting worse by the day, and so bad that I could barely swallow a mouthful of food, knowing how it was going to sit and turn to acid in my throat. I knew it was the stress of living here, but how could I explain that to my kind GP, and what could he do about it? A day or so before, Johnny and Stella had brought had put up and decorated an enormous Christmas tree in the drawing room and fetched what looked like the trunk of a fallen tree to burn as a Yule log in the cavernous fireplace in the great hall downstairs. We went through after breakfast to open the presents we'd put under the tree the night before. Mum had slipped a flat parcel into my case just before I checked my bags in to leave South Africa. Now I opened it to find, to my delight, 2 big prints of my favourite birds, the crimson-breasted bushshrike and the lilac-breasted roller. With them was a note in Mum's handwriting. Enjoy these. You can get them framed and hang them where they'll remind you of the bushveld and home. I was so touched by the gift. Mum had never shown any interest in birds, apart from shooting at the mouse birds, which nipped buds off her plants, or blazing away at the yellow-billed kites that hawked her chickens from time to time with the old farm 12-bore shotgun. The fact that she'd put so much thought and care into choosing something I'd love brought a lump to my throat, and I had to try and keep my voice steady as I showed them to Fred. We played strange indoor games before lunch, one called charades and others, none of which I'd ever come across before. Playing indoors isn't an African thing, and I was completely lost as to what was going on. There seemed to be innumerable and complicated rules about which the entire family argued vociferously and couldn't appear to resolve. Bar and Bob had been drinking steadily all morning, and their voices rose in heated quarrels. It was quite a relief when Jimmy beat the gong to announce that lunch was served, and we sat down to eat roast turkey and a traditional Christmas dinner. This at least was familiar to me and did seem more appropriate in the kind of bleak weather we were having outside. Instead of sitting in a hot dining room with the temperature well around 30 degrees centigrade, eating hot food which a perspiring Mackay had carried in from the stifling kitchen. After lunch, we went back to the drawing room for coffee and liqueurs. Jimmy had tidied up under the tree and put to one side the presents for us to take upstairs later. I looked for my bird prints, but they were gone. I couldn't find them anywhere, so I slipped through to the kitchen where the staff were clearing up. Jimmy, have you seen 2 prints of birds? I left them with the presents. No, they must have gone out with the wrapping paper. He shrugged indifferently. Can I go and have a look? Perhaps I can find them in among the papers in the bin, I asked. I've burnt it all in the fireplace, he said casually, and turned back to load dirty plates into the huge dishwasher. I was devastated, way out of proportion to the actual mishap. Perhaps it was because I felt that something between me and my family had been severed forever. Overwhelmed, I went upstairs and lay on our bed, sobbing uncontrollably until I fell asleep, exhausted by my sorrow. Fred found me there a little while later. Where have you been? I was looking for you, he asked, concerned at my red-eyed state. Are you feeling all right? I told him what had happened to my present from Mum, and he was full of sympathy, but there was nothing that could be done now. They were burnt. Perhaps we can get your Mum to send you another set, he stroked my hair, trying to comfort me. I'll ask her, I sniffled, but knowing it wouldn't be quite the same. I spent the rest of the day feeling flat and dispirited. There were plenty more drinks and party games that evening after dinner, but I wasn't able to muster up enough enthusiasm to try and learn the complicated rules, so I just smiled and went through the motions. A couple of days later, the younger Mackay James siblings went back to their various homes and lives in London, Cambridge, and San Francisco, respectively. I watched them enviously as we waved them goodbye when Johnny drove them off to Crianlarich to catch their train, and despondently I walked back into the house. It felt empty and more desolate than before, now that they'd gone. There were just the four of us again, and we slipped straight back into the routine established before Christmas. I tried to fill my days somehow. The highlights were the weekly prenatal classes and my bi-monthly visits to my kind doctor for checkups. All was going well with my pregnancy and the baby developing as it should, which was reassuring to me, knowing how inexplicably bereft I felt emotionally. That's all for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I do enjoy your comments, so please put them in there. I want to thank John Muslane for doing such a superb job as my sound engineer, as always. And I'll say goodbye to you right now. Bye-bye. That is all for the time being, and there's more to come next week. I would like to thank John Muslane for putting aside his Friday afternoons to help me produce these videos. Without him, I could not do this. I would also like to thank Sean van Vuren for his sterling work in uploading my videos to my YouTube channel, adding the photos, as well as managing my channel so professionally. If you would like to know more about my other works, I have written 5 books in all, and each one is autobiographical. Please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com, where you will find a lot more information as well as plenty of photographs. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my life story, and there is plenty more to come. A thumbnail photo will be attached each week, and thank you so much for all your support and all the very kind remarks you make in complimenting me on my work. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.